in a sec. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special Talking Insomnia episode where we have Angela with us. Welcome.
Hi.
Angela, you're joining from Australia, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, welcome. And I actually, first of all, do tell us how did you find the YouTube channel?
Honestly, I think it was just by chance. I was just like a lot of the stuff on YouTube isn't great around insomnia. And then I just stumbled across one of your success stories and I watched one of them and it was really, really helpful. So I just looked at all the other videos in your channel pretty much.
Wow. Yeah. So glad you stumbled across it. And yeah, with that said, tell us a little about how the struggle started for you, and then we'll see what happened from then. But yeah, how did it start for you?
So if we were backtracking all the way to like when it first started, I guess it was just sort of like out of nowhere. It was on like a really random night. Never really thought too much about sleep at all before this time. And then just like this one night, I didn't even really have anything on the next day. I just kept realizing that I wasn't going to bed and then kept checking the time like over and over again. And that was like the first time in my life that I'd pulled an all-nighter and it terrified me. And so I feel like that led me down into this downward spiral of like doing research and spending all day worrying about how I would sleep the night again. And it was just like, yeah, constant worry and fear and panic about sleeping, even though, yeah, it was like one night. But I think because I now knew that I was capable of not sleeping for one night, that sort of drove me to continue to be fearful for every single night to come after that. Um, yeah, and so because I was like worried about it, my first instinct was, okay, I need to see if there's like something to cure it, something that I can take or something that I can do to make it stop. And so I went to a GP and they prescribed me with melatonin, and they also recommended that I could see a sleep psychologist. And I just first took the melatonin because sleep psychologists were very expensive and I'm like a uni student, so it wasn't the most ideal sort of thing. And the melatonin did help for a certain period of time. And then during that time, I did end up going to a sleep psychologist as well because there were still nights where it wasn't great. And they were helpful to an extent, but like as I said, it was very expensive and not something that I can continue in the long term. And yeah, so I took melatonin for about 2 months, I'd say, because I had like a one repeat on my script. And during that time, I noticed more and more that like I just became really dependent on it, like really psychologically dependent. Like I would get really nervous if I didn't take it at the same time every single night. Like I'd wait till like 9 p.m. or something and I'd have to take it at that time. And if I didn't, if I was like a few minutes late, I would get really, really panicked. And that to me just really like, yeah, wasn't a good mindset to be in about sleep still, even if it was slightly helping.
Yeah, totally, Angela. And sorry to interrupt here, but just so we have a picture, like how long ago was this?
So this is actually around this time last year. So I need to preface this and say that I'm not what you would call like a long-term insomniac or anything. This is like, it was still quite a long period in my life, I would say. Like it was a very serious period of my life. But yeah, definitely not to the extent of where like I know a lot of other people have struggled like years and years or like decades with it.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's just yeah, me letting everyone know.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And like I'm actually compiling a lot of these success stories into a book, and I'm seeing it's some, for some it was like a 2 month really intense struggle. It wasn't that long, but it was really intense. So for some people it was many years, but all these stories are really valuable because the teaching points are really the same. So just a really quick comment there, but again, going back to so maybe about a year ago you had this kind of random night where you didn't sleep at all, but like was it completely random, or was there some type of stress going on at the time?
I think like there was definitely something that was on my mind. Like when you can't get to sleep most of the time, it's because you're thinking about something. And I think it was something like that for the first maybe 1 or 2 hours of like being in bed. But then after that point, like when I became suddenly like conscious and aware of the fact that I wasn't sleeping, is when I started to just get stressed about the idea of sleep rather than the other thing I was thinking of.
Absolutely. And what's interesting here, Angela, is your story is very, very typical. The only thing that is a little bit different is that most people remember what that stressor was, but then later on realize that the stressor isn't important at all. In your case, you don't even remember what the stressor was, but you see so clearly that it was kind of the reaction to it, and identifying not sleeping as a problem that later became a struggle. But anyway, so just a little comment there. So before I ask you to just kind of continue your story, what the sleep psychologist that you saw that one time, like, do you remember what they said?
Yeah, so she was, I saw her twice actually. The first time it was mainly her just sort of getting to know my story like you are now and just like hearing what I had to say and sort of observing. And then the second session is, or in the first session, she actually told me to like start keeping a sleep diary, which I found really interesting because I did do it for like the first week after, and then I found it to be really extremely unhelpful for me. Like it might be different for other people, but I think it just made me focus a lot more on the thing that was making me fear sleep, like the fact that I was like keeping tabs on it.
Yeah.
But then the second time I told her what I discovered, and I was like, oh, this isn't really for me. And then um, she actually she gave me good advice in terms of, because I was always under the impression that, when you go to bed, you go to sleep and then, because she always told me to wake up at the same time. And I was like, okay, I can try and do that. But like, what if I can't go to sleep beforehand, like the night before? Like, what if I can't get my like 8 hours? Like, I need to get 8 hours. And then she was like, no, it's okay. Like, you don't need to get 8 hours every single night. She just said, just go to sleep when you feel like you need to, like when your body and mind is tired enough. And that was that was really helpful advice. Because, yeah, I think before that, I was still so stuck on like, okay, I need to get 8 hours without even thinking that before all of this insomnia came about, I didn't really think about getting 8 hours every night. But then suddenly when I couldn't get to sleep, I'm like, okay, now I need the 8 hours, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. You had never really thought about it, but then you had that sleepless night, you were worried about it, and then this idea came about, like, oh, we need 8 hours of sleep, I gotta have that. And she kind of
Mm.
like dispelled that myth. So that's nice. Um, yeah. And then, so yeah, sorry, I know I interrupted there, but so far in the story, you'd seen the GP, you'd been on melatonin, you'd seen the sleep psychologist, you were now in this, you saw that you were kind of becoming more and more psychologically dependent on the melatonin. That was a little bit scary to you. And what happens next?
Yeah, so after that, so while I've been taking melatonin, I slowly started to make plans again because during this time period, I didn't want to make plans with people because then, what would happen if I didn't get enough sleep and then my mood would be ruined for the next day and I wouldn't have enough energy and all this stuff. That I feel like that was driving a lot of my insomnia, was the fact that I would be too tired to function and do things that I needed to get done. And so after the melatonin, things are slowly starting to get better physically. Like I was like, okay, I can sleep because I'm taking this. The keyword being because I'm taking this. And so I was like, you know what, I'll make some more plans. And so I made some plans with friends for like the next day. And then all of a sudden, the melatonin just didn't work at all. Like I would always sort of assume that it would work. Even if it took a few hours, I would still end up drifting off. But then I had like big plans the next day and I just couldn't fall asleep again. Like well, during this time period before the melatonin, I had quite a couple sleepless nights. But then after I started during the time period when I was taking melatonin, I didn't get any. So I was like convinced that it was a miracle cure until it wasn't.
Exactly.
And yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, I didn't sleep at all that night. And I felt so tired the next day that I was like, oh, I need to cancel all of my plans. This is terrible. And then I was researching online and I found this book by Sasha Stephens called, what was it? The Effortless Sleep Method.
Yes.
Yeah, that book. And I was like, you know what? Now is the best time of any time to start reading it. So I started. And as soon as I started, like the first couple of chapters, she was talking about how you can still live your life and that you shouldn't let it impact you. And I like had this light bulb moment. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so right. And so I like called up my friend, even though I'd just canceled plans with them. And I was like, you know what? I will come. Like I'm exhausted, but I will do what I want to do, and we'll like spend time together and we'll have a good day. And so I still ended up like spending the whole day with them, like going on a day trip. And even though I was dead tired, I still had like such a good time. And I think that's another like big catalyst to what helped me in my recovery process, is the fact that I can still not get a wink of sleep, but have a great time the next day.
Wow, that's amazing. Like how quickly that happened. Like you decided to cancel, you found the book, and I'm guessing that must have been like an ebook. You started reading it, and
Yeah,
then right away you kind of uncanceled the plans.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it definitely wasn't. I thought after that day, I was like, you know what? I'm fully cured. Like this is great. I can sleep soundly now. And it wasn't like that at all. Like it was still very rough patches and still lots of nights where I couldn't get sleep, but it was like I was still recovering, and I could like tell that I was still recovering. And so I would sort of categorize like the time period before I found the book as like a very fearful time period during my insomnia process. And then I feel like Sasha Stephens's book provided me with like a lot of hope. And I feel like that was like the main driving factor to me wanting to recover and me knowing that there is a possibility that I can recover. And so hope was like the biggest thing um, in like the next couple of months in my process, if that makes any
Absolutely.
sense.
No, it makes total sense, and I'm so
Mm.
so glad you stumbled across it. And I was sort of going to ask you about that too, uh, meaning uh, at this point in time, let's say up until you found the book, what were your thoughts around like what was happening? What did you think was kind of happening to you?
Yeah, I think because during like when I did a lot of the research about insomnia, I think my main fear was the fact that it could go on forever, like it could go on indefinitely, because every single time I'd like read a blog post or like watch a YouTube video, people in the comments would say, I've been a long-term sufferer for 15, 20 years. And I was terrified. Like I was absolutely terrified. And I knew that I was like in the early stages. And I think that I thought because I was in those early stages, I could prevent it by doing more research and, trying to find a cure so it wouldn't be long lasting. When in reality, it was like making it worse.
So yeah,
Um,
you had to like unclear, you hadn't really a clear idea of what was happening, but you knew you could happen for a long time. So you really wanted to get a grip on it. And um, did you go through this phase like so many, it's like most people really do, of like trying different supplements and remedies and things like that?
yeah, a little bit. Like I would just try like typical, like those vitamins or like those pills that you get that aren't really. Oh, I did take what's it called? I know the brand name is like Rest of It or something, and it made me super, super drowsy. And it would always work. Like I would get full asleep, but then I would wake up the next day feeling absolutely terrible. So it kind of defeated the purpose of like why. Oh, I remember watching some of your videos actually where you sort of categorized it as like two reasons as to why you're in insomnia. Because it's like either you need energy and to be awake the next day, or you're actually fearful of being awake and not and being like awake at night time and feeling like you should be in bed and sleeping. I definitely know like, yeah, there was periods of time where I was like both, like on both sides. So
Yeah,
yeah, I did
you were both
try.
scared of like I can't be awake at night, and you were also scared of like the consequences of that. So
Yeah.
both two very common drivers. And so okay, you find Sasha Stevens, it gives you hope, and you go through that day with your friends and actually have a great day. But yeah, what happens next?
Yeah, so um after that it was like very I after I read that book, I put aside all of the things that had been trying to help me fall asleep, like the like different pills and like lavender and all this stuff, like all the small things. I just sort of was like, okay, I'm gonna stop using them altogether. And I did for the most part. And I feel like every night after that, no, every good night I had without any of these like supplements or like sleep aids helped me, like gave me more hope and made me sort of like build up that belief in myself that I can and am capable of having a good night's rest and am capable of sleeping. Because I feel like, yeah, after so long without having good sleep, you sort of just forget that you can. And then, yeah, when I finally was able to do it without sleeping aids, it was just like me building up my belief in myself. And even though there would still be nights where it would be bad, I knew that it could be good again. And so, yeah, that was like a new pathway that I was on until
Oh yes,
there
sorry,
was,
Angela. I was just going to say that was really nice to hear. And before we continue the story, just to give us a picture again, like from the time this started, you had the first sleepless night, and until you find Sasha Stephens' book, like how long of a time period is this?
ooh, I would say it was quite a few months, so maybe like around 4 months or so, 3 or 4 months.
Exactly. So it's 4
Yeah.
months or something like that. And again, during
Mm.
these 4 months, you often have sleepless nights, and your days and your thinking was pretty consumed by sleep, etc. And you were tired. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yeah, that's right. You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right.
Okay, so we have a you pretty good picture of what happened, and you were just about to tell us what happened next.
Yeah, so um then I finally, felt the courage to make more plans again. And so I went on a trip for like a few nights with some of my friends. And then like the panic would sort of just sink in again. Like it was like as soon as I would reach a stage where I'm like, okay, I'm getting better, then a doubt would sort of come into my mind. And I'd be like, oh, okay, no, I'm not getting better. This is another night, another bad night. Even if it was like, 2 weeks of good sleep and then one night, the one night is just like inevitable. I felt like I couldn't just always have good sleep. And so when this trip was planned, I knew that I was not going to have a good night. I knew that I was going to have at least one bad night during that trip. And obviously, because I thought that, I was right. So, like the very first night, it was terrible. Like I couldn't go to sleep, and we're all in one room as well. So all my friends around me were all just like fast asleep, and I was just panicking. And I was like, oh, if I can't go to sleep, we can't do things the next day. And I was also scared of being awake because I saw all of them fast asleep. And so I think that triggered like a new sort of like I sort of like categorized them. So like that honestly made me like really angry, which isn't the emotion that you think I would feel, but like I just felt so angry at myself that, after all of this, after like I was so fearful for a period, and then after like I read the book and I like got hope again and I was doing better, that all of a sudden, you know, I could just not do better again. Like I was going so well and then I like would go down so easily. And so I was so angry at myself. And I feel like that's what really prompted me to realize, like, full force that the idea of insomnia is all in my head, and that it was having like such a big impact on my life and on how I socialize with people and on how I make plans. And because like I'm, like a young uni student, I wanted to like be doing a lot of things because that's how my life was before this time period. Like I wanted to go out with friends and do things all the time. And insomnia was just really ruining that for me. And yeah, so I
Absolutely.
was super
I mean,
angry.
like you were still, you were still kind of making yourself I think for a time period, the insomnia kind of made you cancel things. And that's upsetting, of course. Like you want to do things and you cancel them, and then you went into a phase where you were kind of like, no, I'm still going to do things, but then
Mm,
it still interfered, and you got angry at this point. So you're seeing this very
yeah,
clearly. Got
yeah,
it.
exactly. And I think, yeah, I was convincing myself that I was getting better in a way because it
Yes.
was like fake it till you make it. Like I was
Yeah,
just
right.
like, yeah. Um,
Absolutely. Okay, so you're angry, which, I completely understand. And I've heard this from other people, of course, Angela, but yeah, what happens next?
yeah, so it was like the anger just sort of turned into honestly like not caring, and which is, the place where you want to be because it's like before when I was in that hope phase of my life, like I was still focusing on sleep and I was still like I was doing, positive affirmations and like that belief in myself. I was still sleep was still very much in my brain and was fueling my recovery. Whereas when after like I got angry at myself and like really thought about it, I was like, this is all in my head. And I was able to sleep perfectly fine before that one bad night. So like I can still do it. And even if I can't, I can still have a great time. And so yeah, that was like I think the big like thing after the hope period that really like turned it all around and made me like realize that I really shouldn't care and I shouldn't think about it. And yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm smiling as I'm hearing this because you know, when somebody says that, like I just, I don't care as much as anymore, that they're gonna do better. But
Mhm.
also it's because like like it's paradoxical because on one hand, this channel is all about like giving people the hope that nothing is wrong with you and you can do fine and all that. But as part of hope is kind of we're hoping it's like we're still kind of trying. As part of hope
Yeah.
it can lead us to kind of still stay in the struggle, which is almost like when we sort of give up hope in a sense that we give up the hope of finding the cure, we give up like the hope of achieving something. That's actually when we do better. I don't know, does that resonate?
Yeah, 100%. That
Wow.
is so right.
Wow. All right, so you became angry and then you're kind of like, forget about this, I don't care anymore. And what happens next?
And then pretty much, so this is around I'd say like what month? Like August of like last year that this happened. And then after that, it's still, there's still nights where it's not amazing, but for the most part, I definitely feel like I've just sort of I'm got at that point honestly now where I know that I will never go back. And I think that in itself is like recovery for me. And it's like, okay, there are still nights where it's not the best, but those are also quite rare now. And I'm confident to make plans and go ahead with those plans. And for the most part, like I will sleep perfectly fine the night before. And yeah, I think that is like the best feeling ever. It's just knowing that I'm not going to go back to that dark place because I know that I know enough in myself now that I know, and like things that I've heard from like your channel and like from the book, and I'm like more informed about it that way where I can never turn back.
That's music to my ears. So glad to hear this. And I say this quite often that someone who's even like maybe not where you are, Angela, but struggling a little bit more, but they understood enough to not go towards like to the rabbit hole. Like I often say that if you're not going into the rabbit hole, like you're not going to a place where you're trying more and more, then you're going away from it. So, you know, as long as you know enough not to go like in the direction of the rabbit hole, you are on your way to the other in the other direction. So super glad to hear this. And by the way, it sounds like to me when I'm hearing this, it sounds like Sasha Stephens' book helped a lot, and then it was really kind of your own insight and your own kind of self introspection, self understanding that really led you to kind of abandon the struggle. But is that true to say?
Yeah, I would say so. I've never really thought about it like that before, but I guess you're right. Like hearing you say it now. Yeah.
Oh, that's super nice. And so now, my next question becomes, um, like, At what stage did you find this channel?
Oh, I think I found it pretty much during like after I read Sasha Stevens's book, maybe 1 or 2 months after that. So during that stage where I was like convincing myself that I was fine. And I think, yeah, watching your videos like success stories really helped me know that there were other people out there who can recover. And there, when during that time of like convincing myself, when there were bad nights, I would watch your videos the next day. And then those would sort of calm me down and positively affirm that I would have a better night the next night, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mm.
So glad you found value in them, and now your story is going to help a lot of people too. So that's wonderful. Now I have
I
like
really
this.
hope so.
Oh, absolutely, 100%, Angela, absolutely. And I had I have a question for you, which is, I know this is a tricky question, but it is a common question too. And so some people who hear this are going to be like, how can I like I they're going to be like, I understand that kind of not caring so much about sleep is going to help me, but if I don't sleep, I feel so tired and I'm upset with myself and things like that. So how can I not care less about my sleep? What would you answer that one?
Ooh, that's tricky. Because, yeah, I've definitely felt exactly what you said that they would feel like, there would be 2 nights in a row where I get no sleep at all. And I just feel so hopeless. And I really feel like the answer to it is honestly just going with it, which sounds so weird, but like, because at some point or another, your body is and will sleep, like it will. And you just sort of have to rely on that fact. And then it's really just a matter of like, not really practice, but just the more good nights you'll have, like the more hope you'll get. And although this period might be really bad and you might be super exhausted for the time being, your body will eventually sleep and then it'll sort of like re-energize itself. And then once you reach that point, then you can like go again. I don't really know. Yeah, that's a tricky question.
It is, and I think just hearing many different answers to it is really valuable. So I think
Mm,
what you said makes so much sense. And I don't know, I've pondered this a lot, and I just want to share something to get your take on it. But uh, I've heard so many times that people said, like, when I stopped caring so much, that's when I really slept better. But then you have these people who say, like, how can I not care? And sort of the way I think about it is that in one way, we all care. Like, we all want to sleep well. Like, that's just a human thing. But when people say, like, I don't care as much, it sort of means it's okay if I don't sleep. Like, if that happens, well, that happens. Like, I'm not so attached to it. But does that how what does that make sense?
yeah, it does. I would definitely say like that's some ways that I think about it too, is that, there has been experiences where I haven't slept and I've done things that I want to do the next day. But I think like the not caring part for me also just came from me realizing that like, yeah, it was all driven by fear. And I know that it's easier said than done, where it's like, let go of the fear and it won't scare you. But it's so hard, yeah, because it's just like how your brain works, like how your mind just goes down this rabbit hole. Um, and yeah, there really isn't like a set answer. And I really feel like it depends on like the person and their journey and how they come around to it. But for me, it was mainly just driven by like anger. And then I just found peace. I just did. It's so hard to explain. And I feel like I'm not being helpful at all. But just if you are struggling and you are hopeless, like you'll get better. Like you will. Like you just have to believe in yourself and you will.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And something that just came to my mind as we were talking here was like, when you have that moment when you were sort of like, you were angry and sort of angry at yourself and you saw that it's all in my head. When you said, like, well, I don't care anymore. In a way, it's actually like self-kindness, because like you're kind of like, why am I angry at myself? Like, I'm gonna let go of that. In a way, it's kind of like being kind to yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. Oh, yeah, that's a really good way of saying it because I always thought of it as me just like being angry, but yeah, definitely now hearing what you said, it was an act of self-kindness.
To let, yeah, kind of let go of the anger and not be mad at yourself and
Yeah.
whatnot. Very cool. And now I have this question that I ask, that I have started to ask, yeah, pretty much all guests, that if you if you could talk to yourself, like, the version of Angela who had to struggle like a year ago, what would you say to yourself?
I would say that like I know that it seems terrible right now, but like as you said, be kind to yourself. Be like educate yourself in the way that like, by watching your sort of videos and that, like not educate yourself in the way in a sense where you like go down that rabbit hole and you like hear about all the bad stories of people. So like hear the good stories and you will get better. Ultimately, like you will heal and you will recover and it's just a matter of time. It's like not going to be an instant thing, but yeah, you'll get better.
Oh, absolutely. I think you would have you would have appreciated those words, so back then. It would have really, really helped. So yeah, I just want to say it was very, very nice having you here, Angela. Thanks so much for being
Thank you.
part of the community.
Thank you so much for having me. And I know that's I wasn't the best pep talker, but I really hope that it does help someone out there.
It absolutely will. So again, thanks so much, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, see you later. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.